door to my room to go upstairs, and that barrier thing is up. So I didn't really realize it, but I walked all the way to the opposite end of the building to the wall.
Oh, the fire barrier.
Because it looks funny having it or being blocked out of it.
Yeah, it's blocked. I just didn't know we were here. Or I forgot you were. I was gonna go upstairs.
Oh, you're Ellie! Excuse me for introducing myself. I'm Dr. Welcome. Let's go around, quick round. Allie's here to visit the music ed department today. So can you give us a little bit about where you are in school and kind of what your hopes are career-wise?
I go to Buffalo Grove High School right now. It's a suburb of Chicago. I'm looking to come here next year and major in music education, and I play the flute.
Ooh. Well, welcome. Welcome. So we normally meet in a different room, but we're doing GarageBand today and Friday. So we're here, and our hope today is that everyone has a chance to share a little snippet of something they've created. And so my invitation will be for Eric and David to do that maybe around 9:15-ish. If you have something, if not, you won't. The original assignment is to take your round and create some kind of interesting GarageBand arrangement, and that's what you're ideally going to share. And if you're in a place where you have that done and you want to move on to a different GarageBand project, our purpose is for you to explore GarageBand enough that you are comfortable using it and can think about ways of applying it to teaching. That's pretty much the goal. Thank you, Marianne. So a couple other things. The speech ensemble was due Friday. So most of you turned that in, and if you turn it in electronically and I haven't seen it yet, tell me, because I didn't see the electronic one. There's hard copies, because your plan is to get a little bit of feedback from me and then copy for everybody to have in their resource book. The other thing that you're doing for today is to writing a reflection on your teaching last week, and then revising your plan for what you're going to do at the Man Elementary School, and then sending that to me via email. Yeah,
Are we teaching at Man every single week?
between now and semester. Yeah. So the recommendation I've made via email and for some of you in person is to have an anchoring song, a beginning song and a closing song, so you have some structure to what you're doing. Even an anchoring song like "Happy Trails to You Until We Meet Again," or another goodbye song. And hello everybody, and a hello song. I've given you a couple, and there's a lot of really simple ones you can create. Questions? And those of you that are not doing the Man Practicum, I want to find a time to visit you sometime between now and the end of the semester. Man Practicum, though, videotape yourself, because I won't be able to come every week. My hope is to come the next time, not this week or next week, but so you had 2 times on your own, and then I come back next week. That's my schedule. Questions?
I was wondering if you were turning my work arrangement electronically.
Okay.
So I can print it for everybody.
Great. Print just one for me so I can give any feedback before we copy it for everybody. Other questions? All right then. GarageBand. Question, Mary? Okay.
All right.
Taylor has been our expert teacher for GarageBand. Have you used GarageBand before, Al?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you can be our expert teacher too then.
So I'd like to start off dealing with any questions that might have arisen over any work anyone got done over the weekend, particularly for people who weren't here on Friday. Then I'd like to talk for a little bit about how to actually use GarageBand in general music settings. So first up, does anyone have any specific questions? Yes, Jay?
Mine, so I worked on it here, and I saved it under my documents on my folder, and it's not there.
I can't answer that one because I have no idea how the lab folders or files work.
So, until we do that.
Oh, for Al. Oh, yeah. Yes, it's lovely.
Yeah, there's some sort of a guest account system, but I think you have to call ahead. I'm not sure.
Let's see.
Yeah.
I just zoomed out and I see how you zoom that in.
Yeah, to zoom in and out, there's this bar up in the top right of the track list. You can use that, or you can hold down on Command, use the scroll wheel, and on a laptop you can pinch zoom. Or if you have a magic trackpad. I'll wait for Dr. Cohen to get back in here for that. those of you who weren't here on Friday, did you have a good chance to make some progress on this? Unless it got cleared on your documents for some reason.
Yeah, the video was good.
Thank you. I'm glad that it was good. I'm doing another one today, just in case there's anything else to cover. I might not bother. The audio was like super low on the initial thing.
We had somebody comment on it.
A couple people commented who are like professional YouTube accounts who use GarageBand, like, oh wow, I've made a full album for video intros and outros on my channel. Check me out. Like, there's just bots that automatically comment on everything posted about GarageBand on YouTube. It's really interesting. So the goal of the assignment is just set your round up in GarageBand based off the MIDI files with the full round. There is, as a fun way to celebrate birthdays again, and since it's Haviland's birthday, we have actually a GarageBand birthday arrangement. This sort of shows how sort of distorted effects you can get. So you'll see I had on Apple Loops intense, dark, and dissonant tags. So happy birthday, Haviland. That had a pickup as well, and that's another example also of setting bar 2 to really be bar 1 when you're dealing with pickups in GarageBand. Yeah.
Thank you, Ayla.
Yeah.
Very creative.
Just like the happy birthday or intense. I don't know which.
I like the dissonance.
So while a couple people are still working on their thing before everyone has to leave, let's talk about actual lessons that you can build that GarageBand can be applied to in a general music setting. In my mind, there's sort of two different spheres. One is creating materials for other lessons to sort of enhance them with digital audio tracks, and the other is actually working in a lab setting like this where students are using GarageBand. When it comes to materials, there's some really easy things we can approach. And I'll actually throw these on a document to send to the independent study people for the resource book. The easiest thing I think to do for activities that benefit from a metronome is just setting up a drum track in GarageBand and then adjusting the tempo to fit your needs so that you have a more creative, more interesting metronome than just a click, 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 click. Another one can be things like what we're doing right now, setting up interesting tracks to frame the music. You could introduce this as part of the round. You could have this as your play-along track for the round if you're so inclined. So additional, or just accompaniment. Does anyone else have any ideas as to what you could use a GarageBand project or audio file for in a normal lesson setting?
Kind of get them to experiment with genres.
Yeah, you could use different examples, easily set up some different timbres to show them different genre ideas. Comparing styles, these markers. And even timbres. You could easily, if you didn't have a projector screen up, open up GarageBand that you have set up with a microphone, add an instrument track, open up your musical keyboard, go to orchestral instruments, pick something out, and you say, what what instrument family are we hearing? Just playing some notes. Change it to strings. And I've got talk about different timbres with that. Does anyone else have any ideas for materials you could build with GarageBand for lessons?
Well, even just kind of understanding what each instrument is, because there are like Chinese traditional instruments in here
Right?
Yeah.
that I was having fun with last night. Or, you know, what's the difference between a muted bass or a picked bass or a stringer bass? I think just understanding those terms too and defining each instrument would be a good example.
For a lab setting, there's a lot of different things you can build. I talked about some of the ideas in the reading I sent out. Some things you can do are building a GarageBand project ahead of time, putting it on the lab computers, and then having students just simply change the instrument in the library, experiment with timbre, and experiment with how they can change things. There's a green marker that probably is just as bad. Can anyone read that?
Yeah.
Okay. The ink's better. I have trouble with that color. Preset projects for changing. I think in a lot of ways you can accomplish most of the things that educators try to accomplish in any piano lab in a GarageBand lab, in terms of, especially if you have MIDI interface, MIDI input, like we have in this lab. That would be something that you'd have to buy separately, or the district would perhaps even have a rotating stock of. These, most electric keyboards have MIDI output today. These are actually really cheap. They're highly recommended by a lot of educators. They do a lot in terms of actual production, really solid value. These KeyStation M Audio 61s. They're one of the leading cheap synth companies. Good stuff.
By the way, there's an organization NAFME has had called Time Technology in Music Education. So check that out because they're supporting musical learning through technology in different innovative ways, and it's changing daily.
Great. One of the lessons I actually suggested was building an accompaniment to a song. Perhaps you send out a MIDI file of this song ahead. Perhaps the students put it in on their own with a MIDI interface. And then later down the road, you can send those same projects to the band director who can build a smart music exercise with that as the accompaniment to a song. You can integrate into your instrumental education the things that you have already done in general music with GarageBand. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you're working with a group of middle schoolers, and to start using GarageBand, would it be easier to do something on Sibelius or Finale and create that MIDI file, or would it be easier to do what you had in the video on Friday, where you're playing along in GarageBand?
I wouldn't
What would
have.
you recommend for that?
I wouldn't have kids put things in Finale or Sibelius to use in GarageBand. I would have them, do input either with the musical keyboard that's on there or a MIDI input. If I'm building a lesson, because I already have that software and I know it, it's easier to get something that's much more accurate to time than what I'm gonna do as a human being on an interface. If you guys' projects are done right now, we can show those before we move on to the next topic of discussion.
I can show you what I have.
Yeah.
So we can play it.
Yeah.
Put it up here.
Not that.
We should cluster around here maybe and watch it, and I'm not quite sure how else to hear it.
Yeah.
Mine.
Where's the headphones? All the headphones. Hope that. It's like, it's just,
regret the oboe choice. Oboe MIDI does
I
not
love
sound
the
very
rhythmic
good.
patterns. What's the name of the rhythmic
That's Greek Cerritos? I don't know. That's what that was.
I have a question. So my round's in 3/4.
Yeah.
So a lot of the drum tracks that I found, like they loop it pretty much in 4. There has to be a way I can put it in 3.
Yeah, you have to change the time signature up at the top. Yeah, loops are really cool because they adjust to the time signature and to the key signature you set it to. They sometimes don't adjust major minor, but there's a way to filter in the loop setting under scale, major, minor, both, or neither.
So you have yours set in 4/4 or 3/4?
I just changed it.
Change the meter to
So that like helps when you're recording it too. If it's in 3/4, you can
How I cut that.
How do you cut this?
Yeah.
Oh, you don't want that at all? Just click that and hit delete on the keyboard. Or right click it, yeah. Right? Oh, don't click it again. Click like on the title. Maybe right. I think you left it.
Yeah. I was gonna see that again, but I could find like a couple X's from that.
This could
Just one quick announcement for Wednesday. We're going to be in the room on the 3rd floor Wednesday. And watch for an email from Eric about reading from Gordon. We're going to be doing Ed Gordon's Music Learning Theory Wednesday. All right, David, how's it going?
we'll see how it is. I haven't listened to it like
Yeah.
since these changes, so they could
Okay.
be right.
Let's just see what.
Is there a way to do what Eric did on his computer and open it up first year?
So turn that up there.
Can you start it again?
Yeah. I think it sounds okay. I think it's right.
You just hit play.
Oh, my drum track has to go all the way to there.
This is so calm.
So Alex, what we did is beginning the semester, everyone led a round, and they're taking the round that they led and singing that into the recording, playing it, or choosing some kind of sound and making a GarageBand arrangement based on that.
So what I'd recommend for what you're able to actually turn in on Icon is to go under Share and then just export song to disk. You click that, it'll let you save it in any file, folder, location on the Mac, and just upload that to your Icon.
So
And you can then have an MP3 or a WAV file that you can, in a classroom setting, you'd be able to put that on any audio playing device. You can only open the GarageBand project on a computer that has GarageBand.
So what if certain instruments don't play when we choose them? Like what?
You
choose an
might-
instrument and you play.
What is the volume slider set at for those instruments?
Oh, I don't know. Let me find one that would work.
Taylor, would you recommend saving it into MP3 to turn it in?
I'm not sure if it natively does MP3 on these computers or if it only does WAV. Whatever, WAV or MP3 though are probably going to be the best choices for exporting.
if you have the opportunity to play it for me in here, then actually that's good.
Oh, okay.
Turn it separately. Oh, okay. Because this is the best way to do it here. Anybody have something that they can share today, or are you still in the middle of creating?
I have something I can share.
All right, Evelyn has something to share on his birthday.
This looks colorful, so I'm intrigued.
Oh, cool, I'm gonna walk around.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Hey, you have something to share? It's big, yeah, you wanna play this too?
He's making his lips really loud.
Ray and Headland.
You know, I'm pretty sure they do with finale, but they don't with Sedalia because they don't have the drivers in front of Sedalia. You could, in theory, do that. with
Right,
Sedalia.
right. So it makes me want to switch like my
Tomorrow,
composition
because
or
I've
reach
changed
finale
finale
so I can like
Yeah, the role that I
Yeah, and that's just a computer thing. Like,
your
you have your own
position
keyboard,
Yeah.
keyboard, your own
I knew you were really busy.
Yeah.
So,
Everybody's
like,
like,
all
get rid
of
of this last section.
and you know,
so you've got the loop cursor right now.
It's like,
so you
that's
can
the next time people are. That's good.
you can even do it.
Yeah, so my
Maybe the screens are yesterday, design good. Yes.
yeah,
I'll say it. Yes.
thank you.
Yeah. So let's briefly talk about the practicality.
Right.
It's really cool.
I've never seen.
Let's briefly talk about the practicality of actually running a GarageBand lab-based lesson in a general music setting. There's a number of things to consider. One is that you have to have, for a computer, a Mac, or you have to have access to iPads, or in theory iPhones, but I don't think anyone is doing one-to-one with phones. You would probably want a MIDI input device like we have here for most lab-based lessons, because you'll want to be doing more playing in than just dealing with pre-created MIDI files. And some people will do fine with the keyboard typing that GarageBand has if you don't have a MIDI input, but at the end of the day, you're able to do more with one of these MIDI input devices. If you are doing a lab and if you're at a school one-to-one with iPads, it's real easy to get GarageBand on those. But you do have different instruments, the iPad app works differently in a lot of ways. And it does the same MIDI input. You can hook up, if you have the right adapters or dongles, you can hook up a MIDI input device like one of these to an iPad.
And I'm gonna walk Allie down to Dr. Weir's class so she can see some of that class. And
Right.
Short.
But with iPads, I don't think that the program is quite as extensive.
It's not as extensive. You get the touch input for a lot of the keyboards works differently in both good and bad ways. An important thing is that a GarageBand file you create on a Mac, you can't send out. You can't open those on an iPad. You can open up a GarageBand file you created on an iPad on a Mac. So if you're a teacher and you're building a lesson for a GarageBand lab on iPads, you can't build that lesson on a Mac. You have to build it on an iPad if you want them to open up all the same file that they're starting with. If you don't, then you can just grade or assess them on your Mac when they send from their iPads. A lot of schools are going one-to-one with Chromebooks, and a lot of schools already have Windows-based labs. GarageBand doesn't run on those.
On Chromebooks?
No, it's an Apple-only product.
Well, Chrome is
Oh, I
like
guess so.
only Google, like you can't.
Right, you can only run web apps on those. One thing that you can run on Chromebooks, it's sort of like GarageBand. It's called Sound Surge. I heard about it from the trumpet TA Ken. He really likes Sound Surge. It does things. It's not as great as GarageBand, but you might be able to get decent mileage out of it. I don't know a lot about the program, but it's something to know about because so many schools are doing one-to-one with Chromebooks. It has a free and a pro version. For what you would actually probably want to do with labs, you might need the pro version. But for just basic stuff, you can play with it yourself on any device you already have other than a mobile device. If you want to build materials for lessons, like we talked about, but you don't have a Mac of your own, or you don't want to use GarageBand, There's other digital audio workstations out there. They're generally a lot more complex than GarageBand, which is why you wouldn't want to use them for a lab. But Logic is Apple's professional digital audio workstation. It can open GarageBand files. So if you want to grade things or like even edit things you started in GarageBand and you wind up picking up Logic, then you can do that. Reaper is a fairly cheap digital audio workstation. Then there's also Ableton, which a lot of professional musicians use. Adobe Audition Works. Abbott's Pro Tools is probably a lot more power than you need and a lot more complicated than you need, but it's also an option. I am gonna, if you do have a Mac, I'm gonna plug for Logic here real fast. There's an educational deal. Normally Logic is $200 on its own. There's an educational deal where you get Logic and the $300 Final Cut, and there are 3 like accompanying pieces of software that are $150 on their own. $650 software package for $200, all of them. If you're a student.
Is that the one that you like to use the most for GarageBand?
I just picked that up last week. I've been playing around with it. It's more complicated than I assumed it was, but it's cool. You can do like real auto-tune on it, and you can do vocoder, and you get a lot of additional instruments that you can run in GarageBand with it. So if you have a Mac, I recommend looking at those. We'll wait for Dr. Cohen to get back in here to show more GarageBand projects.
You ready for tonight?
I am. I'm pumped. I will show, this is an example of using GarageBand to sort of create an accompaniment or a metronome track. Professor Manning is building up his own accompaniment for the Vaughan Williams Tuba Concerto. And this is an early version. It's a lot cooler now, but this is already pretty cool. He's built this all only using Apple loops. He doesn't use any MIDI input. I was just saying, Professor Manning is building his own GarageBand electronic accompaniment for the Vaughan Williams Tuba Concerto. This is an early version. It's the coolest now. And you can do the same thing for any activity that you would want to use a metronome for. You can use this for your own practice. All right. We were just talking about some of the practicalities of using a GarageBand lab and some of the things that you have to consider in terms of building one, the logistics. Who had one that they were ready to share?
So close. Want to be perfect.
Okay, here's mine.
Everyone can read each other's. Cool. I did post a video, and I'll send this out, covering the couple questions that arose on Friday in terms of cutting the audio, and I think there was a problem with loops that I was having. I don't know that anyone else was having it, and then everyone else had a different problem with loops that I can't replicate, so I can't give a great answer for. But
Leave it the way it is.
this is what was happening with
Yep.
David on
And
Friday.
I don't know how to
I think
solve
it's
this.
something where you have to click one of these first.
Try double clicking an instrument after opening the Apple loops.
Do I like add a new thing?
Yeah, try that, adding a new, anything.
Alright,
Yeah, just software instrument.
I'm ready.
Awesome. And, Trey solved this. Do you remember how you solved the issue where you weren't able to access the loops and all of a sudden you click something, you got it? Did you add a new instrument and then
I think I clicked on the track and then I clicked on loops and it should have came up.
click on the track?
I think click on the thing below all the instruments. You know how there's an empty space there. We had this problem last night too. Yeah.
You mean that space?
Yeah. Maybe click the loops and then click on that space. Or I think
Oh,
last
try
time Gary
clicking
was
right
like,
there.
After you kind of.
Yeah, but keeping loops open.
or was it last night that you had 2 drum kits and for some reason wasn't it something like that?
Yeah, I like added
'Cause
another drum kit and then it worked, but it didn't.
Oh,
We
okay.
both ran into this issue last night,
So try
and then
adding
Madison
this.
started working, so I don't know what happened.
Oh, there it is. Something just.
Now works.
Yeah.
It does that, like I didn't really know how I did it either, it just
It's
messed.
ready for show and tell in Trey's studio. Great, Trey, you figured it out. Yeah, I don't quite how. That's
Sure,
not what
I
happens
think
with
that's
Trey.
what
No, it works.
Where?
It happens,
Yeah,
working
the
happens so fast, it's hard to figure out what it was that made it work.
Boss beat, boss level beat. And now I'm gonna be louder.
Awesome. It does make it really, it's really interesting what you do with texture. That could be, the main musical element that you're exploring with your students, and then having them play with texture. And think of the overlap between the sound and the texture, and maybe with a visual art piece. That's what's, I've always blown away when music teachers have very cool visual art pieces that kind of parallel the learning that's going on, so students can make those transfers. And they can do something with movement that is a little more complicated. Thank you. Good job.
I want to touch on the advanced features while the last people are still working, but before that, another quick logistical note in terms of using this in a lab setting. There are 13,000 loops that come with GarageBand, and there's a bunch of instruments. Most of those you have to download after you've installed GarageBand on your personal computer. They're all installed already on these, but if you were deploying this in a lab setting, you'd have to have the IT people go in on each computer and set up these libraries to have full access to them. You could also decide not to have access to them. It's to restrict certain loops. It's not very flexible though. If you don't have them, you need a password, an admin password to install new instruments or new loops. So if you don't do that ahead of time, you've sort of locked yourself out. There's a couple of things that you can edit on any track, whether it's an audio track or a MIDI instrument track. Your 2 options are going to generally be found either in Smart Controls or the editor. So for example, this MIDI I threw in for Happy Birthday, I can rebalance with the Smart Controls. I can change the low end, the high end. I can adjust sort of equalizer-based things on the EQ. can change the ranges of different things, and that's something I don't know enough about audio engineering to tell you a lot about, but you can play with these things.
How did you get to that screen down there?
This screen is, if you click Smart Controls on the top left, on a track, you can select either Controls or Equalizer. Under Editor, there's other features. One of the coolest things, I think, is the score for a MIDI input. You can see the score of something, and if you put it in with a MIDI input device or your musical typing, you can set it to a different level of what's called time quantizing. So if you set it to like 64th note time quantizing, it might start, and you put it in yourself, it might start what you thought was beat 1, a 64th note ahead tied into beat 1. You can pare down the time quantizing to just what you need so that it's the most. You open up the editor on a MIDI track. It has to be on a software instrument track. And then there's piano roll and score. I just drag this up. You get additional settings on all of these when you drag it up.
And then can you play your GarageBand piece and have the score?
Yes, if you've if you have you can only have it set to one of the tracks at a time. That's a feature of Logic, is that you can, if you have multiple tracks, you can see all of them on a score.
That's great. That's really great.
You can also, for those who are visually inclined like this, see it on a piano roll. For me, looking at a piano roll doesn't do much. But for other people, that is a useful visualization.
Is there, but the piano's vertical?
Yeah, because it's the horizontal axis is in time. So if I were to play it like this, this is this one still. I should switch back to my other. Yeah, I can, for example, look at my boom diod around.
I love the mountains, I love the rolling hills.
I can see it as a piano score as well.
And all the daffodils.
Other advanced settings, you have to select this show hide automation feature. You then pick the field you want to automate, like compression or distortion or even reverb. You can do the same with some of the master tracks, tempo, and others. And then you can adjust, you can create points on this slider, and you can adjust the volume just at those points. So say I wanted to bring the volume down on just this track in the middle point, you can lower it and then bring it back up right there. Those are the most important features to really know in GarageBand. When you don't use some of the advanced features a lot, but if you find yourself using the advanced features a lot and also wanting more advanced features, consider picking up Logic, because I can open this project up in Logic and then have access to all those same settings. Is anyone else ready to show?
Mine's gone, so I asked for help. Oh, gee. It's alright. I'm sure I can make it better than it was. Now,
So basically
what happened is I never usually save stuff to this computer because I don't trust it or I don't know if I'm doing it right. But since I don't have my laptop big enough to have as much, the project's just too big. So I saved it in there and it's not there.
Okay. So there isn't a WAV export. I was mistaken. There is MP3, AAC, and Apple lossless. If you want to export, MP3 is going to be your most compatible format out of those three. If you want to, say, you make something at home on your Mac and you want to bring it in for a lesson, you can just save it to MP3, throw it on any smartphone, and play it on speakers at school.
Are you on your laptop or are you on?
I'm on my laptop, yeah.
So do you mean like through the cloud? Is that how you're transferring it to your phone?
You can do it by wire, however you normally put music on your phone. You can just put it on your music library. If you have an iPhone, you can install GarageBand on there, and no, you can't because you can't export Mac GarageBand projects to iOS. But you can save it elsewhere in iTunes and easily use the cloud if you are on Mac and have an iPhone.
Usually, I do like wedding videos for people, and when I add like music and stuff, I just use iMovie. But this would be so much better and better quality, better quality to put the music on here, tweak it, do all the stuff, and then export it.
Yeah, I believe there's some sort of a way to add a movie track. I know a little bit more about how Logic handles that, but you can set a movie. I don't have an example to show this,
Oh, that's okay.
but
Export it.
yeah, there are definitely ways to work on making movie tracks with this. With Logic and other professional level digital audio workstations have a feature called Rewire, and you can use that with Finale or Sibelius to basically add the entire program as a track in Logic or another DAW. And then when you're editing a movie, you can set the hit points. It follows all the tempo. Everything works just like another track from your notation software. That used to be in GarageBand, and they took it out because when they were paring down the line of, they used to have Logic Express and GarageBand used to, I think, cost money, and Logic Pro, and now it's just Logic Pro, GarageBand. I think my guide says that GarageBand is like $5 or $8 on the Mac App Store, and that's its list price. But if you get new Macs, like it's free. Yeah, and I'm not sure again about how it is on iOS because I think I paid for it a while ago, but it might be free now on iOS. I don't.
I don't think I paid for it from my iPad, but I also know it's not nearly as expensive.
No, but it has some of the interesting things. It does things that you could only accomplish on a touch interface. You can set it so that it adjusts pitch as you sort of slide up and down a key to wobble it. And you can even set it so that it only works in a major scale or a major pentatonic scale. There's definitely advantages to using GarageBand on an iPad for lessons.
On my phone, it's one of the essentials. So it's like, yeah, I guess I don't know. I put like the essentials away in a little thing because I never use any of them.
Yeah.
This is already on my phone. I can download it from the cloud.
All right, we have a share. Let's talk a little bit as a group of what you noticed about creating these and what you noticed about listening to them, as well as what you noticed about applications of GarageBand.
Easy. Or it's like not that difficult to figure out like the bare minimum of like what you want to get out of it, but then it's really easy to just like fall into a rabbit hole. Like, oh wait, I want it to sound exactly like this, and then it takes you like an hour to figure out to like because there's some it's like
What proposed the people like reading it did sing your melodies? Why did you choose to have them be instrumental instead of sing?
So we were actually encountering some issues. Those who pre-recorded them, it didn't line up perfectly right or sometimes perfectly in time. And we had some issues. You have to then go in and edit tempo tracks. It became about as much work as the full rest of the full project to manage that, unless you recorded it along with your MIDI instead of just on your own. And that was, I should have asked people to do that, but I felt like I was asking the MIDI at the last minute anyway. And so then asking people to record with something they did at the last minute, I felt axing the requirement was probably our best approach. Now, the easiest way to do that would be actually in this lab just to sing into the mic. However, we had X number of us, and we didn't want to deal with all the additional sound. It was a big
I always just liked using all the different instruments. Why would I want to hear my own voice when I could have an oboe play Donkeys and Carrots? Or a deep organ?
There's very fun instruments. There's a lot. One of the interesting things. There's so many different synthesizers. It's probably keyboards and synths are the bulk of the instrument choices in GarageBand and Logic.
I like playing with all the instruments and just experimenting. They sounded together. Or then when Ayler in the video, Ayler suggested that we start out with the bass. That was a good call because it was.
Yeah, that's what I
just
felt
keep
worked for
building
mine.
off of it, yeah. So I don't know. I love that about this.
So I'm just jotting down the things we wrote to this document that we can put on for email out.
I think students would really appreciate, especially if you've already introduced the round, because they're not gonna hear all of the extra that you have in your GarageBand file. So if you were to teach the round Donkeys and Carrots, and then he played his file with like his drone or whatever he used, that could just, they could say, well, what if we tried this sound, or just kind of spark that creativity.
We had a conversation about doing rounds last week at Man, and one thing to think about when you're introducing rounds is it can be really complicated to sing a round because that's introducing polyphonic rhythm, polyphonic harmony, and an incremental step to that is to do something called a freeze tone, where you would have like a drone, or you could sing, donkeys are in love with care, and they freeze on that pitch, that's usually the tonic, and then half the group just holds that pitch while the rest of the group sings the rest of the song. And then they have a chance to hear harmony by having a simple way of getting there. So that's a really great strategy to introduce them, like prelude to when you're actually singing around. To sing around, there's just so much independence you have to have with your ear. The students can do it, but it's also better to have some success built along the way instead of throwing something out and not